Welcome back, deep divers. Today we're going deep, really deep, into some pretty profound questions with the language of God by Francis S. Collins.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating book, really.
I mean, the guy led the Human Genome Project,
Right. A pioneer in genetics.
but also he's a devout Christian. So that's what makes this book so interesting. He's trying to reconcile these two seemingly different worlds, science and faith.
Exactly. Can a scientific worldview actually coexist with a belief in God? That's the big question he tackles.
And he argues that they not only can coexist, but they actually complement each other, which is a pretty bold statement, don't you think?
It is, and he uses both his personal journey and scientific evidence to kind of back it up.
I think it's worth starting with that personal journey. You'd think someone immersed in the world of DNA would lean towards atheism, wouldn't you?
You would, right. But Collins actually started out as an agnostic,
Yeah.
very much steeped in scientific thinking.
So what changed?
Well, there was this pivotal moment. During his time as a medical student, he encountered this concept of the moral law, that inherent sense of right and wrong we all seem to have.
The moral law?
Yeah, it made him question whether a purely materialist worldview could actually account for it. If everything is just atoms and molecules, where does this universal sense of morality come from?
It's a question that's puzzled philosophers and scientists for centuries.
Exactly. And the moral law seemed to defy, like a simple evolutionary explanation.
Because if we're just products of selfish genes trying to survive, why do concepts like altruism and self-sacrifice even exist?
Right. Why would anyone risk their own well-being or even their life for another person, sometimes even a complete stranger?
He brings up some pretty powerful examples in the book,
He does.
like Oskar Schindler risking everything to save Jewish people during the Holocaust, or Mother Teresa dedicating her life to serving the poorest of the poor.
Powerful examples of selfless love that don't really seem to fit into a purely evolutionary narrative.
Right, so he even brings in C.S. Lewis's perspective on this.
Yeah. Who aptly points out, and I'm quoting here, "I am trying here to prevent anyone saying the really foolish thing that people often say about him. I'm ready to accept Jesus as a great moral teacher, but I don't accept his claim to be God."
So for Collins, this moral law was hinting at something beyond the material, something more profound.
It really was, and this led him on a spiritual quest, exploring different faiths, until he found himself drawn to Christianity.
But some might argue that altruism it's really just a survival mechanism.
Right.
It benefits the group in the long run, ensures the species continues.
Sure, and Collins acknowledges those arguments, but points out the difficulties sociobiologists face when they try to explain truly selfless acts just through the lens of evolutionary benefits.
He's basically saying there's a depth to human morality that goes beyond, just survival calculations.
Exactly, there's something more there.
So the moral law got him questioning things.
It did.
But it wasn't just this internal sense of right and wrong, was it? The universe itself seemed to present another layer to this whole mystery.
Precisely. He dives into the Big Bang Theory,
Which even for someone who isn't a scientist is just mind-blowing.
I know, it really is. Imagine, like, a universe exploding into existence from this point of pure energy.
It's hard to even wrap your head around it.
I know, but here's where things get even more interesting. The conditions that allowed for a life-supporting universe, like the balance of matter and antimatter, the fine-tuning of those fundamental forces, they're so improbable it makes you wonder if it was purely accidental.
It's like, what are the odds?
Right.
But how do we reconcile that idea of fine-tuning with the fact that the universe is so vast,
Yeah.
with countless stars and planets that don't have life as we know it?
That's a question a lot of people wrestle with, and Collins presents a few different perspectives. Some physicists propose it's just a remarkable coincidence.
A coincidence, really.
Well, others, like Stephen Hawking, acknowledge the possibility of a purposeful creator because of that fine-tuning, even though Hawking didn't personally believe in God.
So even someone like Hawking, who was known for his scientific skepticism, couldn't completely dismiss the idea.
He couldn't. This fine-tuning does make you wonder, was it pure chance? Or was there some kind of guiding hand involved?
It makes you wonder indeed. And Collins doesn't shy away from addressing the criticisms often leveled at religion. He acknowledges the harm that's been done in the name of faith.
He does.
But he argues that judging an entire belief system based on the actions of some individuals is like condemning a tree because someone used its wood to build a weapon.
It's a great analogy, isn't it? Separating the core principles of faith from the flawed humans who try to practice it.
It reminds us that we have to distinguish between the essence of a belief system and its sometimes, imperfect human application.
Right. But the moral law and the fine-tuning of the universe, those weren't the only things that prompted Collins to question a purely scientific worldview.
There was more.
Oh, yeah. He dives into the age-old conflict between evolution and a literal interpretation of Genesis.
Ah, yes. That's a point of contention for a lot of people.
It is.
It seems like some believe you have to choose between accepting evolution or believing in God.
Right.
So how does Collins navigate that?
Well, he argues that a lot of this perceived conflict comes from a misunderstanding of Genesis, actually.
Okay.
He emphasizes that various interpretations of Genesis existed even before Darwin.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Thinkers like St. Augustine, for instance, they saw room for metaphorical readings of Genesis.
So it's not necessarily meant to be taken literally.
Exactly.
Interesting.
He also draws a parallel with the Galileo affair.
Where the church initially resisted the idea that the earth revolves around the sun.
Right. But eventually came to accept the truth.
It's a reminder that our understanding of Scripture can evolve, too, in light of new scientific discoveries.
It can. So it's not about choosing between science and faith, but finding a way for them to coexist to inform each other.
That makes sense. So what's Collins' take on Genesis, then?
Well, he believes that the primary purpose of Genesis is to convey spiritual truths about humanity's relationship with God.
Not to be a scientific textbook.
Not at all. It begs the question, if we approach Genesis with that understanding, does it truly conflict with the concept of evolution?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
And this is where things start to get really fascinating, because Collins then takes us on this journey through the human genome, the blueprint of life itself, to explore these ideas further.
Yes. And with his background leading the Human Genome Project, I can't think of a better guide for this journey.
I agree, and he shares some truly astonishing findings from the project, particularly the similarities between human DNA and the DNA of other species.
It's like peering into the source code of life and seeing these echoes of shared ancestry, these hints that we're all connected in ways we never imagined.
It's mind-blowing, really.
It is, and these similarities are more than just vague resemblances. He points to specific examples, like the fusion of 2 chimpanzee chromosomes to form human chromosome 2. It's pretty striking.
It's like archaeologists uncovering a hidden inscription that rewrites history.
It really is. And he also talks about the mutations in the FOXP2 gene.
Which is potentially linked to the development of language in humans.
Exactly. It blows my mind to think that there might be a gene that played a role in giving us the ability to speak.
To have this very conversation.
I know. It raises so many fascinating questions about how our genetic makeup shapes who we are. It suggests that, in a way, our ability to ponder these profound questions might be tied to the intricate workings of our DNA.
Wow. That's incredible. Does all this evidence from the Human Genome challenge any preconceived notions you might have had about our relationship to other species?
It certainly provides a powerful perspective, especially for those who may have questioned the concept of evolution. It's not just about fossils anymore, it's about the blueprint of life itself revealing our interconnectedness. But to fully understand how Collins reconciles these scientific discoveries with his faith, we need to explore his concept of biologos.
Okay, and that's where things get really thought-provoking. We'll dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive. All right, let's unpack this biologos concept. It sounds pretty crucial to Collins's whole argument.
Yeah, it's essentially the idea that God works through the natural processes of evolution.
Okay, so it's not about God intervening directly, but more like setting things in motion and letting them unfold.
Exactly. It suggests that God, being outside the constraints of time and space, could have orchestrated this whole evolutionary process.
So what might seem random to us, limited by our, linear perception of time, could actually be part of a grand design.
Precisely. A design that only God could fully comprehend.
It's like watching a time-lapse video of a flower blooming in seconds, when in reality that process took hours or even days.
Right. We see those snapshots, those individual mutations and adaptations in evolution, but not the grand symphony unfolding over, billions of years.
That's a great analogy.
And Collins argues that this perspective doesn't diminish God's role in creation. If anything, it elevates it.
It's like the difference between composing a simple melody and conducting a whole orchestra. Both are impressive, but the complexity and orchestration of the latter is on another level entirely.
Exactly. So how does this biologos idea actually work? Does he lay out some specific principles?
He does. Biologos is built upon 6 key premises.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, it affirms that God is the creator of the universe and all life within it.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the second premise?
Second, it accepts the scientific evidence for evolution as the mechanism for, well, for the development of life.
So God created the universe, but used evolution as the tool to bring about life's diversity.
That's the idea. And third, it acknowledges that evolution is not a random, purposeless process, but rather one guided by God's divine plan.
So even though the mechanisms of evolution might appear random on the surface, there's a deeper intentionality behind them.
Right. The fourth premise states that humans are unique creations,
Yeah.
made in the image of God, endowed with a soul and a capacity for relationship with the divine.
That addresses the concern that evolution reduces humans to simply another animal species.
Exactly. Fifth, Biologos acknowledges the reality of human sin and the need for redemption.
Okay, so it maintains that our spiritual brokenness is not simply a product of evolution, but a consequence of our choices, our separation from God.
Right. And sixth, Biologos emphasizes that science and faith are not inherently incompatible.
They're not two opposing forces.
Not at all. They're two distinct ways of knowing, each offering valuable insights into the nature of reality.
So it sounds like Biologos tries to bridge this gap that often exists between those who see science and faith as, like, inherently at odds.
It does. But does it receive criticism, from both sides?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
Atheists, of course, reject the premise of a creator altogether, so any concept that incorporates God is problematic for them.
Right. And on the other side.
Young Earth creationists who believe in a literal six-day creation, as described in Genesis, they reject the notion of evolution playing any role in the development of life.
So it seems like Biologos occupies this middle ground that doesn't satisfy either extreme.
It does. And that might explain why it's often overlooked in these, heated debates.
Yeah, it's like trying to find common ground in a polarized world.
It is. But Collins believes this perspective deserves more attention, particularly for individuals who are struggling to reconcile their faith with the undeniable evidence for evolution.
It's about finding a way for both science and faith to make sense.
Exactly. And he emphasizes the importance of finding the right language to articulate this nuanced perspective, a language that respects both the integrity of scientific inquiry and a depth of religious belief.
You mentioned earlier that Collins acknowledges the harm done in the name of faith.
I did.
It seems like this nuanced perspective, this willingness to engage with scientific discoveries while still holding on to faith, might be a way to move beyond those harmful interpretations, right?
It could be, yeah. It's definitely a step towards a more constructive dialogue between science and religion, a dialogue that acknowledges the limitations of each perspective, but also recognizes the valuable insights they can offer.
Now, shifting gears a bit,
Right.
Collins spends a significant portion of the book discussing the ethical implications of these scientific advancements, particularly in medicine.
He does. He delves into the moral practice of science.
And he tells this really powerful story from his time as a doctor in Nigeria.
Oh, yeah, about a young farmer with tuberculous pericarditis.
It was a pivotal moment for him, reshaping his understanding of service and compassion.
It sounds like a profound experience.
It was. He went to Nigeria with these aspirations of making a difference, of being this great white doctor who saves the day. But his encounter with this farmer revealed the true meaning of service.
It wasn't about his skills or accolades, but about recognizing the inherent dignity and worth of each individual.
Even in the face of immense suffering.
Exactly. So what happened with the farmer?
Well, the farmer needed a pericardiocentesis, a pretty risky procedure to drain fluid from around the heart. And despite limited resources and significant danger, Collins went ahead with the procedure.
Yeah.
Afterwards, the farmer looked at Collins and said, "Don't be afraid. You came here for one reason. You came here for me."
Wow. It's like the farmer saw right through Collins's anxieties and aspirations.
He did, and it was a reminder that true compassion isn't about recognition, but about simply showing up for another human being in need.
It's a powerful story. It highlights the profound impact of genuine human connection, especially in the face of suffering.
And it reminds us that there are aspects of the human experience that transcend the purely material. Things like love, compassion, the desire to connect with something greater than ourselves, things that science might not fully explain, but that faith often speaks to.
It brings us back to that core question Collins wrestles with throughout the book. Can science and faith coexist?
And after exploring his own personal journey, the scientific evidence that points towards a creator, and the ethical considerations of scientific progress, what's his answer?
He definitively says yes. His concept of biologos, this idea that God works through the natural processes of evolution, it offers this bridge between these seemingly disparate worlds.
It suggests that instead of being locked in this constant battle for supremacy,
Yeah.
scientific inquiry and religious belief can actually complement and enrich each other.
Exactly. It encourages us to approach both science and faith with a sense of wonder and humility, recognizing that there's always more to learn, more to discover, and more to understand.
But the ethical questions Collins raises about genetic testing and these potential future enhancements,
Yeah.
they're pretty thought-provoking. We should delve into those a bit more.
Yeah. It's like we've been handed this incredibly powerful tool
Mm-hmm.
in the form of genetic technology,
Right.
but now we have to figure out,
Yeah.
how to use it responsibly.
How to use it ethically. Exactly. What are some of the specific ethical dilemmas that Collins highlights?
Well, he talks about BRCA1 testing, for instance,
Okay.
which can identify individuals who are at a higher risk for certain cancers, like breast cancer.
Right, right.
And while this knowledge can be empowering, it also opens up a Pandora's box of ethical considerations.
Just imagine finding out you have a gene that increases your chances of developing a life-threatening disease.
Yeah.
It'd be hard not to think about the implications for yourself, for your family.
Absolutely. It raises so many questions.
Yeah. What are some of those questions?
Well, for one, do you have a moral obligation to share this information with family members?
Right, because they might also be at risk.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of potential discrimination based on genetic predispositions.
Oh, like insurance companies or employers using this information to deny coverage or job opportunities.
Exactly. That's a scary thought.
It is. It really highlights the need for clear ethical guidelines and legal protections to prevent that kind of misuse.
Absolutely. Collins really emphasizes the importance of genetic counseling and support for individuals who are navigating these complex issues.
It's not just about the science, it's about the human impact of these discoveries.
It is. And the pace of scientific advancement, it often outpaces our ability to really grapple with those implications.
It feels that way sometimes, doesn't it?
It does.
And Collins also touches on the concept of genetic enhancement, right?
He does, yeah.
Not just treating diseases, but actually enhancing human capabilities.
That's where things get really interesting and potentially a bit unsettling.
Yeah, imagine a world where parents could select their children's traits, from physical attributes to intelligence.
It raises questions about what it means to be human, about the value of diversity, about the potential for widening societal inequalities.
It's almost like a science fiction scenario, but it seems like we're getting closer and closer to that reality.
We are, and Collins doesn't offer simple answers to these complex questions.
He doesn't try to, wrap everything up in a neat little bow.
No. He encourages us to, engage in thoughtful reflection and
You really
dialogue,
wrestle with these issues.
to wrestle with them. He stresses the need for an ethical framework that keeps pace with scientific progress, reminding us that we can't just blindly embrace every new technology without considering the potential consequences.
It seems like a recurring theme in the book is this call for humility.
Yeah.
Humility in the face of scientific discovery, recognizing that there's always more to learn, that our understanding is constantly evolving,
Right.
and humility in the face of faith, acknowledging that our human grasp of the divine will always be incomplete.
That's a great observation.
It's like we're standing on the shore of this infinite ocean with science and faith offering us different vessels to explore those uncharted waters.
And who knows what we might discover? New insights into the workings of the natural world, a deeper understanding of our place in the cosmos, perhaps even a glimpse of the divine.
Maybe the real discovery is not about finding all the answers,
Yeah.
but about learning to ask better questions, to embrace the mystery,
Right.
to appreciate the beauty of both the scientific and the spiritual perspectives.
Collins certainly suggests that those two perspectives, rather than being at odds, can actually illuminate and enrich each other.
It's about finding that balance.
It is. He shows us that it's possible to embrace those awe-inspiring discoveries of science while holding onto the wonder and meaning that faith provides.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the language of God,
Yeah,
I'm left with this sense of profound possibility.
ultimately.
Yeah, possibility for new discoveries, for deeper understanding, for more harmonious relationship between science and faith. What about you?
Well, Collins leaves us with a challenge, doesn't he?
He does.
A challenge to embrace both the language of God and the language of science, to engage in thoughtful dialogue, and to seek truth wherever it might lead.
And if God is truly the author of the laws of nature, as Collins believes, then exploring those laws through scientific inquiry can be seen as a way of understanding God's creation more deeply.
It's a beautiful thought.
It is, and our pursuit of scientific knowledge should be guided by a sense of ethical responsibility,
Absolutely.
recognizing that the choices we make today will shape the world of tomorrow.
They will.
So, to you, the listener,
Yes, to the listener.
we leave you with this final thought. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking truth.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This has been The Deep Dive.
It has.
And we thank you for joining us on this incredible journey.